Welcome to this launch function. I'm Nitant Kenkre, as you might have guessed, or known. Now, who is Nitant Kenkre? Simply an old man, more or less at the end of his days, but a man immensely proud of his Goan heritage. I participate in this book launch with a little bit of joy and a little bit of sadness. Joy that you've all come here to listen and that I have an opportunity to speak to you. Sadness because I cannot see you in person and that this must be a pre-recorded conversation, not in which we are physically present together. Well, dudachitan takachir. That phrase brings me to the unfortunate admission that I feel ashamed that I have never given a speech in Konkani, and therefore I don't think that I can adequately do that this time. And Konkani is my own language. That is why the feeling of shame. And so I cannot be fluent in it. In fact, I had half a mind to start here in Konkani and give a speech which is a mixture, moving from Konkani to Marathi, from Marathi to Portuguese, and from Portuguese to English, which are the four languages that I learned in that order when I was a little child in Goa. But I thought that you might take it to be some sort of a show-off action, so I didn't want to do it, so I must take recourse to English. Except, for once, to say to you, in Portuguese, bem-vindos todos vocês, in a blend of Konkani and Marathi, suswagatam, and in English, of course, welcome to you all. I don't want to take too much of your time, but you may be curious about why I have called the book In Lieu of a Memoir rather than a memoir directly. I'm not going to tell you. You will find the explanation in the book. This is a way of intriguing you and therefore for you to want to find out by reading the book. You may wonder what the book contains. Well, Saudades de Goa, for one. Stories about people close to me, my father, my mother, my teachers, my dear friends. How we relate to other people in this world is another ingredient. Musing with a spiritual bent, even a bit about God. A little bit about my profession, which is theoretical physics, both in its content and its practice. And fun stories about academics, including travel to various countries all over the world, some light stories that I hope will bring a smile to your face, and a few that might bring a frown as well. Well, that should be enough attempts to whet your appetite about what is in the book. That should leave you sufficiently intrigued to explore and discover. A peculiar feature of this book is that it is riddled with poems that I have composed. Most are in English, but some are in Konkani. I will finish this welcome by reciting two of them for you, both about scenes in Goa. The first is in English, and it is called Fish. Here goes. Fish. When I was 8, my brother taught me how to fish. He had me hold the rod. At the end of the line, he hooked the bait, an earthworm, dug freshly from the mud. "Fling the line," he said, "like mine." I did. I noted the cork on my line floating, the lead on my brother's sinking. Cork for the tyro, lead for the wise. 100 mirrors shone on the river as the waters flowed and flowed. Suddenly, my cork dove in the water. Pull, pull now, my brother said. I pulled. The little fish rose from the waters, holding fast to my line, dancing wildly for joy as it died. I learned 2 lessons that day: how to fish and how to die. Before I recite the second poem, the one in Konkani, I want to tell you that there are so many people that I owe thanks to for making this function and this Goan publication of my book possible, that I will not express any thanks to anyone, not even to Harshad and Mandavi Sansgiri. The second and final recitation is in Konkani. It is called Goinchamad Odunkad, and it describes the feelings of a Goan as after a visit he is leaving Goa and is in great pain about forgetting all the memories of his place. Goinchamad Odunkad. Goinchamad Odunkad, takli atan limpakar. Shetan bandan chiryan yadi, sodun atan vimander. Katlyo dhavyo somplyo atan. Katlyo dhavyo somplyo atan पणसांचे हडवे घरे. आंब्यांचो गोड शिरो आडसरा उदाक. पदेरालो हुंचो उंडो, लावंक ताका तिख्ख तोंडाक. हळसाण्याचें घालून सुंगट, सांडून वचप जमत कोणाक? विसर आतां विसवणाक. फडफडीत ती चणाक, हुमणां आतां केन्ना परत मेळटलीं भुसाक. कानाक म्हज्या सांगता हांव, विसर गोंयचे आवाज आतां. दर्या ल्हारां गोमटी गितां, देवळाचो चौगुडो इगर्जेची घांट. वर्सां कितलीं परत वतलीं, देवाक खबर, नकळो हांव. दिश्टी केन्ना पडटले ते मांडवीचो तीर आनी जुवारीचो कांट. सोंपले दीस आनंदाचे, म्हणचें पडटा म्हाकाच म्हाका. तकली आतां लिंप कर, ह्यो यादी सोडून विमान धर. Well, I'm sorry to present to you these things without my being with you there. Thank you for having, as you must have, listened to everything that I have said. Enjoy the launch function, all of you, and God bless you.
आयज मातयेचो वास, थोडे पावसाचे थेंबे, पूण मळबांतल्यान खोगे ना. सत्रेची गरज ना, उंच उंच माड ना, आंब्याचें झाड ना, शेत ना, पनेळ ना, दर्याचें ल्हार ना. भोवमानी श्री नितांत केंकरे हांच्या ह्या काव्य ओळींतल्यान हांव मांडवी तुमकां काळजांतल्यान येवकारतां. वयल्या तांच्या काव्य ओळींतल्यान गोंयची याद, गोंयांत येवपाची तांकां लागिल्ली तळमळ, भूक दिसून येता. आयज सोबीत अशा सांज वेळा हांव सगळ्यांक बरी सांज आवडेता. आमचे मामा म्हणजेच भोवमानी श्री नितांत केंकरे कांय कारणाक लागून हांगा पावले ना, तरी आपलो व्हिडिओ धाडून तांणी आपली खोस उमेद उक्तायल्या. तांकां आमी पळयलें आनी तांची उमाळे आयकले. तांची आयज इत्सा पुराय जाता हाचेर इतली आनी दुसरी खोशयेची गजाल खंयचीच ना. आयज हांगा आमी एकठांय जमल्यात ह्या सोबीत अशा भोवमानी श्री नितांत केंकरे हांच्या इन ल्यू ऑफ अ मेमोआ ह्या पुस्तकाच्या अनावरण सुवाळ्याक. ह्या सोबीत सांजे भोवमानी श्री नितांत केंकरे हांच्या पुस्तक अनावरण सुवाळ्याक हाजीर आशिल्ले आयचे मुखेल सोयरे गोंय विद्यापिठाचे आदले उपकुलगुरू भोवमानीस श्री सतीश शेटये, मानाचे सोयरे भोवमानीस श्री अजय वैद, बाय इजाबेल सांता रिटा वाज, तशेंच हांगा जमिल्ल्या श्री नितांत केंकरे बाब हांचे इश्ट परिवाराक आमी काळजांतल्यान येवकारतात. मागता बाब हर्षद संजगिरी लागीं ताणें मानाची सोयरी बाय इजाबेल सांता रिटा वाज हांकां वेदेर घेवन येवचें. तशेंच भोवमानी श्री अजय वैद हांकांय वेदीर हाडचें. गोंय विद्यापिठाचे आदले कुलगुरू भोवमानी श्री सतीश शेटये बाब हांकांय वेदीर घेवन येवचें. भोवमानी श्री संदेश प्रभुदेसाय आयज कांय कारणाक लागून हांगा पावले ना ताची आमकां खंत भोगता. शब्दां विणें मोग दाखोव येता तो फुलांनी, पूण आयज तुमकां आमी येवकारतात एका ल्हानशा सोबीत अशा रोंप्यान. हो रोंपो म्हळ्यार मोगाचें प्रतीक. चोयवशी फुलुदी, मोगाचो परमळ, आनी हो मोग अमेरिकेंत लेगीत पावदी. तर शब्दां विणें आमच्या मोगाक भेटीन मना काळजांतल्यान तुमकां सगळ्यांक येवकारता. हो मोग आमचो स्विकारचो. भोवमानी श्री नितांत केंकरे हांच्या इन ल्यू ऑफ अ मेमोआ ह्या पुस्तक अनावरण सुवाळ्याक आयज आमचे मदीं मुखेल सोयरे म्हूण हाजीर आसात गोंय विद्यापिठाचे उपकुलगुरू भोवमानी श्री सतीश शेटये बाब. भोवमानी श्री सतीश शेटये बाब हांची वळख म्हळ्यार ते एक ओशनोग्राफर, जिओफिजिसिस्ट आनी आदले गोंय विद्यापिठाचे उपकुलगुरू. आनी सगळ्यांत व्हड गजाल म्हळ्यार शांती स्वरूप भटनागर पुरस्कृत सायन्स अँड टॅक्नॉलॉजी खातीरचे मानकरी. तांचो हो भोवमान तांच्या पृथ्वी, समुद्र, वातावरण आनी ग्रहगिऱ्याच्या वावराक लागून जाल्लो आसा. अशा ह्या व्हड वैज्ञानिकाक आमचो माये मोगाचो येवकार. मागता बाब विहान बुयावा लागीं ताणें आयच्या ह्या सुवाळ्याक हाजीर आशिल्ले मुखेल सोयरे गोंय विद्यापिठाचे उपकुलगुरू श्री सतीश शेटये हांकां मोगाचो रोंपो भेटोवन येवकारचें. भोवमानी सतीश शेटये बाब तुमकां काळजांतल्यान येवकार. तशेंच आयज ह्या पुस्तक सुवाळ्याक मानाचे सोयरे म्हूण आमचे मदीं आसात डॉक्टर भोवमानीस डॉक्टर अजय वैद. ते एक नामनेचे डॉक्टर. तांचे आनी केंकरे घराण्याचे सामकें लागशिल्लें अशें नातें. मराठी रंगभुमी आनी साहित्यांत तांचें भरपूर अशें योगदान आसा. भोवमानीस अजय वैद तुमकां काळजांतल्यान येवकार. मागता बाब विहान बुया लागीं ताणें मोगा रोंपो दिवन तांकां येवकारचें. तशेंच आमचे मदीं हांगा आसात मानाचे सोयरे म्हूण बाय इजाबेल सांता रिटा वाज. तांची वळख म्हळ्यार ती धेंपे कॉलेजीची इंग्लीश विभागाची मुखेली आसली. तिचे केंकरे घराण्या कडेन खुबशे लागशिल्ले अशे संबंद. तशेंच इन ल्यू ऑफ अ मेमोआ ह्या पुस्तकाची प्रस्तावना तिणेंच बरयल्या. तुमकां आमी काळजांतल्यान येवकारतात. मागता बाब विहान बुयावा लागीं ताणें मोगा रोंपो दिवन तांकां येवकारचें. देव बरें करूं बाब विहान बुया. मोगाचो येवकार जालो. सोबीत अशा सांजे ह्या सुवाळ्याक सगळीं एकठांय जमल्यात हें पळोवन श्री नितांत केंकरे हांकां उमेद जातली हातूंत इल्लोय दुबाव ना. ते आयज लेगीत गोंयचेर अमेरिकेंत रावन लेगीत तितलोच मोग करतात हाची गवाय म्हळ्यार इन लीव ऑफ अ मेमोर. खरें म्हळ्यार हें पुस्तक अमेरिकेंत एमेझॉनाचेर प्रकाशीत जालां, पूण श्री नितांत केंकरे हांकां आपल्या भुंयेचेर हें पुस्तक प्रकाशीत जाल्लें जाय आसलें आनी आयज तुमच्या सगळ्याच्या मोगाक लागून तांची इत्सा पुराय जाता ही भोव खोशयेची गजाल जावन आसा. हें तांचें पयलें पुस्तक न्हय, तर हाजी आदीं हेर पुस्तकां अमेरिकेंत प्रकाशीत जाल्लीं आसात. पूण इन लीव ऑफ अ मेमोआर हें पुस्तक म्हणजे श्री नितांत केंकरे हांचो आत्मो, तांच्या काळजांतले उमाळे, तांची व्यथा, कथा, विचार, भावना ह्या पुस्तका वरवीं तांच्यो गोंयच्यो याद्यो सामक्यो जिव्यो तटतटीत जावन दोळ्या मुखार उब्यो रावतात. कोंकणींतल्यान ताणें बरयल्ल्यो कविता वाचतना अमेरिकेंत आपली पुराय जीण सारून लेगीत गोंय, आपली भास ते केन्नाच विसरले नात हाची जाणविकाय आमकां जाता. भुरगेपण पणजे शारांत, उपरांत अमेरिकेंत शिक्षण आनी गोंय सोडून वचून थंय स्थायीक जावन एक भौतीक शास्त्रज्ञ म्हणून संवसारभर नामना मेळोवन ही फक्त केंकरे कुटुंबाकूच न्हय तर पुराय गोंयकारांक अभिमानाची गजाल जावन आसा. हाजी दखल गोंय सरकारान घेवन तांचो ह्या गोंयच्या भुमीचेर भोवमान करचो अशें म्हाका दिसता. तर ही कार्यावळ फुडें व्हरतना सगळ्या आदीं मागता तांचे बरें मागपी आनी आयच्या सुवाळेची मानाची सोयरीत बाय इजबेल सांतारिटा वाज हिच्या लागीं तिणें इन लीव ऑफ अ मेमोआर पुस्तकाचेर थोडे भितर आपले विचार मांडचे.
A very good evening, dignitaries, friends. I'm too small to be here. I should have been down there, but I think it is being recorded, so I will stay at the mic. I am really honored, and I feel a sense of privilege that I have been asked by Nitant to introduce his book. I prefer the word celebrate his book, and also, since this is a memoir, in lieu of a memoir, that I can also celebrate the author. It is not his first book. He has written books on science, on philosophy, one volume of poetry, and now comes his memoir. The book has actually been released in the US in the month of May, and Nitant was very keen that it should come out on his wife's birthday, and it did. How he manages all these things I don't know, but he does manage, and the book came out exactly on the date that he had in mind. If you look at this book, it is really a multi-faceted offering. You know, when you read the book, you will see he talks about a Roman god that fascinates him, Janus, with two faces. And he said he encourages his students to have that attitude. You come across a theme of study or a problem, and you find it asserted in a particular way, look at it differently, question it. And if it holds up after all your aggressive inquiry, then you take also another point of view. I find in his writing a variety that is absolutely amazing to me. He writes in this book itself about science, about art. He writes prose, he writes poetry. He has illustrations in his own hand and some rare photographs, one of which you will surely look at it with wonder, is with the Dalai Lama. So the book by itself is precious because it offers something which is, I think, extremely rich and extremely rare. The chapters, he begins with his origins in Goa, and I'm absolutely sure that we will all vibe with this chapter. We are all his fellows in our love for this little place. And I guarantee to you that what he writes will go straight into your heart. For instance, there's one little passage about how to eat a mango. And if you think I'm going to tell you how to do it, forget it. You have the book. You look at it for yourself. There are incidents where he recounts moments with his family. And the connections I find fascinating. Nitant says that when he now prepares for a lecture, he prepares them vocally, loudly. He goes for a walk. And at least twice, he practices his lecture. And at one point he asked himself, how did I get into this habit? And he says he remembers sitting on his dad's cycle. The father is riding the cycle. The little boy is sitting on the crossbar. Sleep heavy on his eyes. He is about to fall off, but the father is holding him. And in the background, the voice of the father practicing his own lecture for the next day. As you know, Nitant's dad used to teach at the Lyceum, where he was a professor of art as well as mathematics. Exciting stuff, because Goa is, as he himself has said, very close to his mind and to his heart. The next chapter is called Relating to Others. Again, I find this fascinating. He talks about a family, an American family, who received him when he first went as a young student, and how they made him welcome. Then he talks about his 25 research students, 25 PhD students he guided. If you look at the achievement of our friend, it is nothing short of exceptional. Then he talks about the consortium of the Americas, which he founded and which he led, directed for 16 years. And it was meant, he says, to forge bonds in science as well as cultural bonds. As part of the same chapter, he talks about his friends from Goa, his IIT friends from Powai. And it's interesting to know that he has kept in touch with them. Even today, recently he had a lecture, online lecture for Dempe College. And some of his friends were there online, watching and listening. So over the decades, Nitant Kenkre has kept in touch with his friends. What really moves me is what this man finds in people, and I mean all people who come his way. Their intrinsic value. Nothing superficial about it. His awareness of each one's intrinsic value comes across powerfully in the book. One of his chapters is called Thoughts. And naughtily, it begins with his dog. He starts writing about my dog. But it doesn't end there, because he's actually on a philosophical journey, beginning with the concept of the ego, my dog. My means whose? What is my? And he goes on, the entire chapter is philosophical thoughts. And it is in this chapter that you find that beautiful photograph with the Dalai Lama. There's one chapter on physics and academics where he talks in detail about his science-related travels, all the collaborations that he was involved with, and the awards that he has received. There's one chapter that I find pretty moving. He calls it Maladies, Melodies, and More. As most of you might know, he has gone through some difficult health matters, and he has coped with them through the poems that he has written. Now, how fascinating is that? So the maladies, together with the melodies, make for a chapter that is unforgettable. There is another chapter called Miscellaneous, and he ends with an epilogue. How do we look at the life and work of this man? Each one of us will look at it differently. You know what comes to my mind? Somewhere along the book, he talks about having heard one of his colleagues speaking about doing research and weaving an entire tapestry. That phrase he has taken and he has nurtured it. And this concept of weaving, again, I find very fascinating. Where each stitch is exciting. Each moment, whether it is research or the day of one's life or any pursuit, maybe the publication of the latest book, every little detail is exciting. And also, the entire tapestry, all the details put together, the pattern that has evolved, that he finds equally fascinating, and so do I. If you allow me, I would like to read a poem of his. It's called My Neighbor. But before I do that, I would like to explain to you what I am doing here. Why am I here? Our families, Nitant's and mine, have a whole lot of connections. In fact, that is Goa for you. Everybody knows everybody else. I came in here and everybody was so cordial and so familiar. My father and Nitant's father were colleagues in the PWD. Then Professor Kenkre, who taught at the Liceo, taught art to my brother. My mother was Nitant's primary school teacher during his Primer Grau. And what I personally find most exciting is that the school, the government primary school where my mother used to teach, it was in Mala. It was in the house of Dr. Hodarkar, where for some time the Kenkres lived. And some rooms were given to the school. So I too studied there. And we had very stern instructions from my mother: you will not disturb Mrs. Kenkre, who is unwell. So make no noise or you will have to deal with me. And how do I know Nitant? Thanks to our good friend, Mrs. Ramola Antam, who invited us for lunch 23 years ago when Nitant was here and he was in Goa, and Ramola invited us for lunch. And since that time, I have been in touch with him. So we are long distance friends, and I have great admiration for his work. And for the man. I'll read it quickly. My Neighbor is the name of the poem. Before his house stands a broken driveway with cracks in it, as in his old cheeks. Grass and weeds grow unkempt from the concrete mirrored by his unshaven face. In front of the garage, one lampshade is broken. The other leans crooked. Neither light is ever on. The lawn by the side stresses the freedom of cumbersome growth. But when you ring the bell, the old man opens the door and the world lights up with magic. Kindness incarnate. He welcomes you, seats you in his best chair, and chats with you on whatever subject you choose. Ask him about the stars and the moon, and he will be to you a poet, if you please, or an astronomer or practical sailor with instructions to travel on the sea or the Milky Way. Ask him about your malady, and he will come up with a remedy, citing medical texts and the old scriptures from Trivandrum and Mingpiao and 15 other parts of the world. Ask him about love potions if you failed at wooing, about the dictums of Machiavelli if politics is your trouble, about what glue to use in carpentry, or what to say to your dog, so on daily walks he pulls you less. Every time you visit him, you return an optimist, with a spring in your stride and a song in your heart. I don't know how he does it, how he can know so much or be so kind. I think he is a realized soul. And before I say thank you to you for your patience, I read this poem because I think it is a mirror of the author of In Lieu of a Memoir. It is the kindness and the erudition and the intellect of Nitant Kenkre. Thank you very much.
देव बरें करूं बाय इजाबेल. बाय इजाबेल हिणें इतले सुंदर शब्दांनी पुस्तकाचेर आपलें मत मांडलां तें आयकून आतां पुस्तक वाचपाची सगळ्यांक उमळशीक लागली आसतली. आपल्या मातेचो मोग एक ल्हानशाच गजालींतल्यान हांव सांगूंक सोदतां. जायते वर्सां आदीं तांचे पूत प्रभव जेन्ना गोंयांत येवचे आसले तेन्ना ताणें सहज अशें आपल्या बापायक म्हणजेच भोवमाने श्री नितांत केंकरे हांकां विचारलें, डॅडी तुमकां हांव गोंयच्यान येतना कितें हाडूं? तर ताणें वेळ काडिनासतना रोखडीच जाप दिली, म्हाका कांयच हाडनाका, येतना हाडपाक म्हळ्यार इल्लीशी गोंयची माती घेवन यो. तर ह्या तांच्या उतरांतल्यान आपल्या भुंयेचो मोग दिसून येता. आपली माती, आपली मनशां तांच्या काळजांत आसात. आनी आतां वेळ आयला ज्या खातीर आमी हांगा जमल्यात तो म्हळ्यार पुस्तक अनावरण करचो. मागता आयचे सुवाळेचे मुखेल सोयरे गोंय विद्यापिठाचे आदले उपकुलगुरू भोवमानेस डॉक्टर सतीश शेटे हाणें इन ल्यू ऑफ अ मेमॉर ह्या पुस्तकाचें अनावरण करचें. मागता डॉक्टर अजय वै बाय इजाबेल हांचे लागीं ताणें इन ल्यू ऑफ अ मेमॉर ह्या पुस्तकाचें अनावरण करचें. देव बरें करूं भोवमाने श्री सतीश शेट्ये बाब, श्री अजय वैद आनी बाय इजाबेल. आयज श्री नितांत केंकरे हांणी आपल्यो यादी गोंयकारां सुवादीन केल्यात. त्यो प्रत्येक गोंयकाराच्या काळजांत उरच्यो हीच आमची आस्त. नितांत केंकरे हांचे आनी एक बरें मागपी आनी लागींचे इश्ट तशेंच आयचे सुवाळेचे मानाचे सोयरे डॉक्टर अजय वैद हांचे लागीं मागता ताणें ह्या सुवाळ्याक आपले 2 शब्द सांगचे.
नमस्कार. माचेर बशिल्ले सगळे मानेस्त आनी नितांत दादाचे सगळे बरे मागपी. म्हाका जेन्ना हांवें सांगलें की यू विल बी अवर गेस्ट ऑफ ऑनर म्हणून हांवें ताका विचारलें वॉट डू यू एक्सपेक्ट मी टू डू. तो म्हणालो तुज्यो पोन्न्यो यादी कितें आसा त्यो सांग. हांवें पुस्तक वाचलां पूण हांव पुस्तकाचेर कांय उलोवचो ना. नितांत केंकरे म्हणून आमी केन्ना म्हणोच ना ताका. हांव ताका नितांत दादाच म्हणटा किंबहुना आमच्या घरा सगळे ताका नितांत दादाच म्हणटाले. कित्याक म्हजो बापूल भाव बसला तो हांगा. तो ताचें नांव आनंद, ताचें दुसरें नांव नितीन आनी ताका नितीन म्हणपी नितांत दादा एकटोच, बाकीचे कोण न्ही. आबाचे आनीक तुमी सगळे वळखता आसतले डॉक्टर गोविंद वैद्य म्हणजे आमी काका म्हणटाले. तर आबाचें आनी काकाचें एक वेगळेंच नातें आशिल्लें. न चुकता दर दिसा सांजचो बोट टाय घालून एक दीस टी शर्ट नाजाल्यार ताजें तें बेल्ट लावन आबा सदांच येतालो आनी आबा बरोबर नितांत दादा आसतालो. आनीक तुमकां पोन्नें घर जाल्यार वैद्याचें घर म्हणून जें आसा तें कोणाक पळय याद जाता आसत. आतां थंय दुर्गा चेंबर्स आसा आनी टायटन शोरूम आसा थंय आमचें घर आशिल्लें तें कॉर्नराचेर. आनी अशें मदीं 4 सोंपाणां आशिल्लीं काळी वयर चडपाक आनी 2 वटांनी 2 अशें बंद केल्ले पॅरापेट कशें आशिल्लें. ताचे भितर बाग आशिल्ले काकाचे पेशंट बसपाक म्हणून. तो आमचो खेळपाचो जागो, त्या बागाचेर खेळपाचो जागो आमचो. तर नितांत दादा आनी आबा आयले की नितांत दादा येतालो तो बाळा कडेन उलोवपाक. ते क्लासमेट. आनी आबा येतालो तो काका कडेन उलोवपाक. ताज्या मदीं आमी नाचून भायर खेळून येताले, कित्याक तेन्ना शिरगांवकर रोडाचेर क्रिकेट खेळूंक मेळटाली. गाडयो नासताल्यो न्ही, आनी तो रस्तो डांबरी नाशिल्लो. तर तेन्ना त्या पॅरापेटीच्या भितरल्या बाकाचेर नितांत दादा टू पुल द लेग्स म्हणटा पळय तें करतालो. कितें करप ताणें म्हाका याद आसा. अरे तूं कितें करता काय अशें विचारप. हांवें म्हणटा तो कावळो बसला तो पळयता तूं. कावळो पळयता आनी आमकां घाई खेळपाची न्ही. तर तो कावळो जाल्यार व्हडलो जालो न्ही, आनी ताणें तुका जाल्यार ताच्या फाटीर बसयता आनी तुका वयर व्हरून हाडटा म्हूण सांगलें दाखोवन जाल्यार तूं कितें करतलो अशें म्हणून विचारप. आनी कितें करतलो म्हणून हांवें सांगप दिसता हांवें कितें तरी ताका हांव अशें करतलो तशें करतलो. एक दीस ताणें म्हाका विचारलें माजरूच हुनीर कित्याक खाता, हुनीर माजराक कित्याक खायना. आतां म्हाका दिसता की तेन्ना म्हाका दिसतालें हांव कित्याक कितें विचारता म्हणजे म्हजी फकाणां करतालो तें म्हाका कळटालो न्ही. हांव उत्तर दिता तें आबा 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 यो पळय अजय कितें सांगता म्हणटालो. तो कावळ्याचेर बसतलो मरे आनी मागीर चांद्रार वतलो खंय, मागीर हांगा वतलो खंय. तेन्ना म्हाका दिसता हांव 5वेन 6वेन आसतलो पिपल्सान. तर आतां म्हाका दिसता की आतां जे आमी NEP म्हणटा एक्टिविटी बेस्ड लर्निंग, दीस वॉज एक्टिविटी बेस्ड लर्निंग. की भुरग्याचें इमॅजिनेशन इतलें ताणप की तातूंतल्यान ताणें सोल्युशनां सोदून काडप हें पळय आशिल्लें तें एक्टिविटी बेस्ड लर्निंग ताजे कडल्यान तेन्ना शिकलो काय कितें. आनी तशी विचार करपाची एनालिटिकल पद्दत मागीर म्हज्यान डेवलप जाली काय कितें असो विचार हें पुस्तक वाचतकीच म्हज्या तकलेन आयलो. आबा बरो आर्टिस्ट सगळे जाण जाणात, स्पेशली पोर्ट्रेट आर्टिस्ट. तर आबान स्केच काडीत बसप येवन. काकाक पेशंट आसताले ताका वेळ मेळटालो तेन्ना मागीर गजालींक बसताले ते. आबा गेलो काय डॉक्टर जेक्सुकेर येतालो, मागीर तांच्यो गजाली चलताल्यो, कोण कोण येताले. पूण मदल्या वेळान आबा स्केच काडीत बसतालो. आनी आबा भितर स्केच काडटा आसतना नितांत दादा आपल्या बोल्सांतलें पेन काडटालो आनी आबा काडटा तशें मातशें कितें काडून दाखय रे म्हणटालो. हांव कितें काडटालो ती म्हाका याद जायना, पूण काडटालो तें बरें काडनाशिल्लो कित्याक हांव परत केन्नाच आर्टिस्ट जालो ना आनी पेन्सील आनी पेन हातान घेतलें ना. पूण अश्यो गजाली नितांत दादाच्यो आनी म्हज्यो खूब जाताल्यो. मदीं जेन्ना नितांत दादा आयिल्लो तेन्ना म्हज्या एका 2 प्रोग्रामांक तो आयिल्लो आनी हें पुस्तक ताणें म्हाका बरयलें की आपणें अशें पुस्तक बरयलां तें पणजेंत म्हणजे गोंयांत पब्लीश जावंक जाय अशें म्हाका दिसता. कित्याक एमेझॉनाचेर तें घेत जाल्यार म्हारग पडटा. म्हणजे तूं कितें करूंक शकता जाल्यार पळय. तर हांवें म्हाका पुस्तक धाड हांव वाचतां. ताणें म्हाका पुस्तक धाडलें PDF फायल. तातूंत म्हाका बरयलें की पयलो चॅप्टर वाच, 5वो चॅप्टर वाच, यू वील लायक देम बिकॉज दे डील वीथ गोवा. आनी 3रो चॅप्टर मेलोडीज एंड मेलोडीज. सो 3रो चॅप्टर मागीर वाच अशें. आनी हांवें 3रो चॅप्टर पयलीं वाचलो. वो मागीर वाच कित्याक म्हणटा तें पळोवपाक तो पयलीं वाचलो. सो मॅडमीन सांगलां पळय आतां द 3rd चॅप्टर मेलोडीज आनी मेलोडीज वाचतकीच आय वॉज टेकन बॅक. ताज्या जाल्ल्या दुयेंसाचेर ताणें तो पूर्ण चॅप्टर बरयला टोटल. तो यू जस्ट कॅनॉट इमॅजीन वॉट ही हॅज अंडरगॉन थ्रू. तो चॅप्टर वाचसर तो वाचलो हांवें. मागीर पयलो चॅप्टर वाचलो. अशें करून सगळे चॅप्टर वाचले न्ही म्हज्यान राव नजो जालें. म्हणून हांवें ताका मॅसेज केली की म्हाका तुजे कडेन पर्सनली उलोवंक जाय. केन्ना उलोवंक. तर ताणें सांगलें तुका केन्ना वेळ आसा तेन्ना सांग कित्याक तुजो दीस ती म्हजी रात आनी आय एम उसरां उठपी आपूण बिकॉज ऑफ माय हेल्थ प्रॉब्लेम्स. तर हांवें ताका मागीर आतां तुका वॉट्सॅप कॉल केल्यार जाता तर कर म्हणला. तर हांवें वॉट्सॅप कॉल करून ताका जें सांगलें तें सांगता. इट इज लिटल अबावट द बूक रादर दॅन भुरगेपणांतलें सांगच्या परस. पयलीं म्हणजे मॅडमीन सांगलां तशें आंबो कसो खावप हें कोणें तरी बरयल्लें हांवें पयल्या फावटी वाचलां. सगळ्यांनी आंबे खावन पळयल्या पूण आंबो कसो खावप हें इंग्लिशीन वर्णन करप इतलें की तुज्या हातान तो आंबो आसाचें दिसता. ताणें 3 प्रकार सांगल्या. एक शिरो कापून आंबो खावप. आतां ती शीर कशी खावप ताजें एक्सप्लेनेशन पळय दिलां ताणें. येदो व्हडलो पॅरेग्राफ आसा तो. म्हणजे तें वाचपाक तरी पुस्तक घेवकूच जाय. पयलें शिरो कापून खावप सारको सिस्टमॅटीक. दुसरें इल्लोसो बुराक करप आनी आंबो चोखप. आनी तिसरें आंबो सोलप आनी तो अख्खो तोंडान घालप. सोलिल्लो आंबो तो मागीर हांगच्यान गळटा, हांगच्यान गळटा, हांगच्यान गळटा. तें वाचतासर म्हाका दिसून अशें करीन दिसलें आंबो हातान आसा काय म्हणून की दॅट वेल डिस्क्रायब. म्हणजे तें एक. दुसरें ताच्यो कविता पळय आसा, पोएट्री इज मोर पिन पॉयंटींग, मोर फोकस्ड देन इज प्रोज अशें म्हाका दिसलें. तो खाटीर पडिल्लो आसता. ताचें दुयेंस जालें तेन्ना तो हॉस्पिटलांत एडमीट आशिल्लो आनी तो खाटीर आशिल्लो. आतां जेन्ना हें दुयेंस कसलें तें मनीस जाणा, ह्या दुयेंसाचो एंड कितें तो जाणा, आनी ताचे ट्रिटमेंटा खातीर जेन्ना खाटीर मनीस आसता, एकटोच आसता, तेन्ना ऑब्वियसली प्रत्येकाच्या मनांत येता हांव गेलो जाल्यार फुडें म्हज्या फॅमिलीचें कशें जातलें. तोच विचार ताच्या मनान येतालो. पूण ताणें ताची पोयम बरयल्या ती वाचून जाल्यार मनीस रडलो ना जाल्यार आय लूज एनीथींग. इतली पिन पॉयंट पोयम आसा. एब्सोल्युटली. You can make out what emotions a person can undergo. You can generalize that and make that out. Number 2. And number 3, since madam is also from theatre, I am also from theatre, we have something called as Stanislavski theory in theatre acting. म्हणजे acting म्हणजे हांव जेन्ना acting करता तेन्ना हांव तो मनीस जायना. तो मनीस जाल्लो जाल्यार प्रत्येक हॅमलेट मरतलो आशिल्लो. सुरी महाराजान नवो हॅमलेट हाडचो पडटलो आशिल्लो. तो हॅमलेट काय मरना न्ही, एक्टर तोच आसता. सो वॉट डज दीस थियरी से की यू हॅव टू बी ऑन द स्टेज परफॉर्मिंग, बट यू हॅव टू बी अवे फ्रॉम द स्टेज ऑब्झर्विंग युअर परफॉर्मन्स. सो यू हॅव टू लुक एट युअर सेल्फ एज टू वॉट यू आर परफॉर्मिंग. दॅट इज स्टॅनिस्लावस्कीज थियरी. Observe yourself. You cannot be that. And exactly Nitant Dadan तेच केलां, which is very, very difficult. He has taken a bird's eye view as if he is a third person observing himself. ताका लागून आपल्याच आयुष्याची एनालिसिस divided into these chapters, but looking at the whole life as a third person's perspective. Which is very, 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 very difficult. आनी हें म्हाका इतलें असह्य जालें की हांवें ताका फोन करून हें सगळें ताका सांगलें. आरे म्हणे कितें रे. आनी मागीर अर्दवर हांव ताका सांगतालो दीस थिंग्स. सो म्हाका अशें दिसता. आनी पयलींचो नितांत दादा जो म्हाका याद जाता भुरगेपणांतलो म्हज्या भुरगेपणांतलो तो आनी हो आतांचो इज टोटली चेंज्ड. असो नाशिल्लो तो भयंकर हांसून खेळून मस्ती करपी आशिल्लो. आतां आनी ताजें जाल्यार पुस्तकां ताणें खंयची खंयची वाचल्या. अध्यात्माची पुस्तकां पळय ताणें वाचल्या. रामायण, महाभारत, वेद आनी XYZ आमी नांवां आयकून आशिल्लीं अध्यात्माची पुस्तकां ताणें वाचून ताजें इम्प्लिमेंटेशन करून ताजें एनालिसीस करून आय थिंक ही इज फॉलोईंग दॅट लायन ऑल्सो. सो म्हाका अशें दिसता की पुस्तक हें एक वेगळ्या तरेचें पुस्तक. इट इज मेमोआर्स बट इन रिटन अँड कन्सिव्ड इन अ टोटली डिफरंट वे, बट बिफिटींग हीज नॉलेज अँड हीज एनालिटिकल मायंड. थँक्यू.
भोवमाने श्री सतीश शेटेबा हांचे लागीं 2 शब्द सांगचे.
Respected dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me express my gratitude to Harshad and Mandavi Sansgiri for giving me the opportunity, in fact the privilege, of speaking on this occasion when people who know Nitant much better than me are probably in the audience. I'm grateful. Nonetheless, after I was told about the book, I did go over it, and there are fascinating elements to it, which I think both the speakers who have spoken already have already told you. What interested me is the book provides a contrast between how life was about 50 years ago and what it is now. Nitant studied in Panjim, then went to IIT Bombay. But both Panjim and Powai were quite different places then than what they are today. He, getting into IIT, which were new institutions, itself was, I think, a courageous step, which suggests to me he knew about how education system was changing in the country. The first IIT was set in 1950. The second, and that was at IIT Kharagpur. The second was 1958 in Bombay, and that is where Nitant went. Prior to that, Nitant was from the first batch which entered colleges in Goa after its independence. So he, in fact, marks the first batch of that step which increased access to higher education far beyond what it was at that time. He carried on with that, subsequently went to IIT, and I think he must have realized that institutions which bring together talent from across the country is an education by itself. As a matter of fact, it's often said that those people who go to these institutions learn more from the interaction with fellow classmates than what happens in the classroom itself. In his book, he talks about the interaction which is with his classmates. He, I think, developed a totally different way of learning through these interactions. He joined the electrical engineering program at Powai, but as the course developed, he got interested in some other things, mathematics and physics. And even though he graduated in electrical engineering, he went into statistical mechanics for his further studies. Creative mind finds its star through activities which are difficult to define. But I think somehow through that random process, Nitant had found his star, and he stuck with it for the rest of his life. You can see the books that he has written, on statistical mechanics, quantum mechanics, and so forth. But it wasn't just statistical mechanics which interested him. It also triggered his creative mind, also triggered other interests. And as Ajay just said, probably the purpose of education is to somehow excite those ideas. When Nitant and his classmates were going through their engineering program, India was going through a major reorganization of technical education, higher education, and so forth. There were 3-year degrees, 4-year degrees, and 5-year degrees at one time, all leading to engineering. The BSc program used to be 2 years after what was called inter-science, which has subsequently been replaced by the higher secondary program, followed by 3 years in sciences and 4 years in engineering. We somehow settled into that pattern. Experiences then are relevant today because I believe the new education program is a further step to rationalize what exists in the country today. And it's quite likely that the chaos education system went through at that time before it settled down into a pattern will repeat itself for some time at least. And let's hope that it takes us into a system which is better organized than what we are. The reason I'm saying, and I spent a little bit of time in pointing this out, is I think our education system does need a major restructuring. And Nitant is an example of the necessity to do that. Our boxed-in programs, I think, takes away more from us than it really teaches us. So how did Nitant manage to get out of that box and think about religion, mathematics, physics, and art in one shot? I do believe that part of it might have come from the environment at IIT, but quite a bit of it must have come through the genes. And let me relate to you an incident, what I mean by genes and the environment which existed early in his age, to explain this varying interest from poetry, prose, religion, mathematics, and physics, including artistic endeavors in between. I will relate to you an incident which was told to me that involves 3 personalities. One, the eldest amongst them, was Professor Ramchandra Naik, who happens to be my grandfather. He was the older amongst them. When he was 40, Nitant's father was in his 20s. And the third person in this group, by no means an exclusive group, but this happens to be related to the 3 of them, was Bakibab Borkar, at that time in his 20s, a budding poet. And these 3 were friends, even though there was quite a bit of difference between Professor Naik and his other 2 colleagues, almost half his age in fact. But that did not make any difference to them to interact. So as as Professor Naik was turning 40, the other two decided to give him a present. And what they did as a present is interesting. Baki wrote a poem. His poem is entitled it was in Marathi. Varsho Tavashiri Varsha Fule Saharshadni Yashakirti Parimale. Subsequently, I found out that this poem is one of the poems which is in the collection which was published by Padgaonkar in I think 1961. So it was a highly respected poem. It was written to celebrate the 40th year of somebody that Baki respected. Abba, that is Nitant's father, prepared a scroll in which he wrote this poem. And he, being an artist, has a sketch of Professor Naik in it, and visualization of this Yashakirti Parimale rendered by his artistic talent. Now, his birthday happens to be on 13th of August. It is a day when usually Goa, it rains a lot. It so happened that on that particular 13th of August in 1933, it didn't rain. And on the day of his birthday, after dinner, these two guys, Bakiba Burkar, guys then, Bakiba Burkar and Abba, got the whole family. They used to live in Fontainhas on the same road, which is named after, subsequently named after Professor Naik. It's very close to Rue de Oren Creek. So they went to the creek and the whole group got into a canoe. Using the canoe, they went to the middle of the Mandavi River. It happened to be a moonlit night, it wasn't raining. And there, Bakiba Burkar recited his poem. And subsequently, both of them handed over the scroll to him. This whole incident was told to me by my mother, who happens to have witnessed this. It tells you that there existed people, creative minds, who celebrated occasions in their own way. We don't, I don't know, I'm an optimist, so I hope there are some amongst us who still celebrate it that way, because it requires talent, it requires confidence in oneself on how to do things, and it requires gumption, as it's often called, to do things differently than what others do. And I believe Nitant's inherited some of these qualities in order to have the gumption to create productivity, produce works of art as well as mathematics and sciences, which ultimately the origin seems to be the same, whether it gets expressed in the form of music or art or dry numbers or physics is immaterial. It is ultimately rooted in mind's ability to look at things differently. And I think Nitant's book is an expression of that ability to think differently. Something that our younger generation should be aware of. And I don't envy the younger generation. They are kept so busy thinking about the exams that they have to go through. I just hope that once they go over this hump where they are pushed into a pattern, their inborn qualities of thinking from first principle somehow will blossom. And this book may well be an inducement for that thinking out of the box blossoming. And that's why I think our younger generation should take a look at how creative minds evolve over time. So I hope our society gets this point across. I'm grateful to Nitant for having brought this point into the mainstream through his writing. And even though he doesn't want to call it a memoir, it is a memoir with a message. And let me wish the book all the best as it percolates in the society. I should thank Nitant for having put together such a book, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
देव बरें करूं. मोमाने श्री सतीश शेटे बाब. पुस्तकाची तोखणाय खूब जाली आनी मामाची तोखणाय खूब जाली. म्हाका दिसता हें सगळें आयकून तांकां हांगा गोंयांत येवपाची उमळशीक लागतली हातूंत इल्लोय दुबाव ना. आनी आतां वेळ आयला निरोप घेवचो. मागता मामा श्री नितांत केंकरे हांचे भाचे श्री हर्षद संतगिरी लागीं तांणी ह्या वेळार उपकाराचें उलोवप करचें.
गोंयचे माड ओडून काड तकली आतां लिंप कर. This very statement somehow sends a mild shiver down my spine. Just because it shows how painful the thought must be to the author, who happens to be my uncle, whom I affectionately and respectfully call Nitant Mama, in his just released book, In Lieu for Memoir. And this is what a memoir is all about. Good evening once again to all of you for this special occasion. Distinguished guests, on the days, family members, well-wishers, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to deliver a vote of thanks to all those who have made it possible today, directly or indirectly. First of all, let me extend my heartfelt gratitude to everyone present here for this release function and making it a grand success. On behalf of Nitant Mama, it's my immense joy and appreciation that I express my deepest thanks for your presence, your valuable time and support during this occasion. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Nitant Mama himself for writing such an incredible memoir. His creativity, dedication and hard work has brought this book to life, and we are grateful for its release in Goa. That has made his dream come true. As you all know, this was first released in the US in the month of May this year. I would like to express my gratitude to our esteemed guests who have graced this event with their presence in spite of their busy schedule. Your valuable presence have added prestige and significance, and we are honored to have you join us in this celebration. Let me start with Ms. Isabel Santarita Vaz, former head of Department of English in Tempe College. As she has mentioned, she is the daughter of Nitant Mama's primary school teacher, as well as close friends of the Kenkres. Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable time, your address, and of course for the foreword of the book. Dr. Ajay Vaidya, generation of doctors, and a family doctor too, and of the Kenkres, and very well known personality in the field of Marathi literature. Thank you, Doctor, for your address and valuable time. Dr. Satish Shetye, former Vice Chancellor of Goa University. And this is interesting, as I am told, both our grandfathers were extremely close friends. And I am also told that his grandfather, Ranumama Naik, was instrumental in teaching Nitant Mama Portuguese language at the age of 9, due to a sheer challenge thrown by a then Portuguese gentleman to converse with him in that language. And as we all know, Nitant Mama's strengths, he did learn Portuguese and did converse with him on that point of time. So I'm taking you 6.5, 7 decades back, and this is what our memoir is all about. Thank you, sir, for your valuable time and address. A special mention must go to the publisher, Curate Books Private Limited, and we have a gentleman to the core and a warm-hearted person, Mr. Rama Harmankar, and Kedar is there, of course. They're warm-hearted persons. Their unwavering support and commitment throughout the publishing process, their expertise, guidance, and professionalism have played an integral role in bringing this book into a reality. Thank you for your time. Furthermore, let me extend my heartfelt thanks to the management of Institute Menezes Braganza Hall for this wonderful arena. I would like to express my gratitude to our friends, family members, well-wishers for your presence and the words of encouragement, which means a lot to us. A special thanks to my classmate from the 5th standard onwards. Of course, he's not here present at the moment. Mr. Prashant Desai for his time and helping me in arranging this logistics in this part of the city. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you to Mandavi also for her constant, unconditional support in making this dream come true for Nitant Mama. Last but not the least, I would like to thank each and every one of the attendees who took their time to be present to the release event. Your support, enthusiasm, and warm wishes have filled our hearts with joy. In conclusion, since this book holds a special place in our hearts, we hope that you enjoy reading it as much as we have enjoyed bringing it to you. Thank you once again for being part of our journey and making this function a memorable event. Thank you.
सगळ्या काळजांतल्यान देव बरें करूं. आमी तुमचे आभारी. पुस्तक विक्री खातीर उपलब्ध आसा. ही प्रत प्रत्येक गोंयकाराच्या घरांत आसची अशें आमकां दिसता. आनी वतना यादी घरा घेवन वचूंक विसरनाकात. मोग आसचो. देव बरें करूं.
Thank you.